Welcome everyone. My name is Nick Thomas. I'm the finance editor, or associate editor, I should say, at Becker's Healthcare on the editorial team. And welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Better cash flow: how purposeful automation is accelerating revenue recovery for hospitals and health systems. Just a few quick, rather boring housekeeping instructions. If you have any questions throughout today's webinar, you can type those into the Q&A box that you see on your screen. And you can do that throughout the whole webinar process. You'll find a few engagement tools on your dashboard. Check out those, please, and make sure you fill them out for the session survey. We will have a series of questions during today's webinar, poll questions, I should say. When we get to them, the question will pop up in your slides box and we can submit your answer directly on the screen. Today's session is being recorded and it will be available after the event, and you can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar. And if you're having any trouble at all technology-wise, obviously, the default thing is to refresh your browser. But if you're having real problems, please submit any technical questions into the Q&A box and we'll try and help you out. So without further ado, just a quick introduction to the two presenters. Lisa Osborne is the Vice President of Marketing for FinV. She's an experienced B2B marketing professional with over 10 years of healthcare experience, leading teams for both private equity-backed and public companies. And then Ryan Miller, the Product Manager at FinV. He's been with the company for over 8 years and brings more than 15 years of experience in various analyst and managerial roles in the IT industry. So I'm going to hand it over to those two people and enjoy the webinar, and we will catch up with the Q&A at the end of the session. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here and excited to be presenting today to all of you on this great topic of automation, right? It's such a hot topic in the industry. We believe we have some specific ideas around how to automate and where you should prioritize, what tools to leverage in this endeavor. So let's start with kind of the obvious, and I think why many of you are here today. I heard from the Becker's team, some record numbers of signups, which is awesome to hear. But the reality is everybody is looking for automation in healthcare today, right? We have lots of different data points from the industry showing that providers are actively looking to accelerate their software investment. And within that, automation is one of the particular ways that providers are looking to make those investments. In fact, out of those 45%, the number one priority is revenue cycle. And then within the revenue cycle bucket, it's a lot of how do we make things move faster? How do I touch the most number of accounts in the most efficient way as possible to really drive here the efficiencies that I need. And a lot of CFOs, a lot of revenue cycle managers really look to automation as that catalyst to do so. And the reason for that, I believe, is I think we've seen a lot of success in the industry from automation. If you take everything from early EDI transactions and what that automates from a process perspective, we have as an industry from a revenue cycle standpoint already saved $122 billion by leveraging automation. So we're taking a lot of that administrative cost and burden away by leveraging this tool. So when we see success, we look for more. And there are estimates out there from leading industry thinkers that said there's at the very least another 16.3 billion that can be saved through revenue cycle automation to take away that excess administrative burden in the process and cost that we all know very well in this whole process. So, what should you automate and how, right? We like to say here, in the whole title of this around purposeful automation is you don't want to automate a broken process. If something was broken from a manual perspective, you don't want to just automate something that doesn't work, right? If you're getting denials because of, medical necessity, you want to fix the problem that's causing that denial to happen before just automating it away. One, example that I like to use, and Ryan will really dig into it here, is you have to cut a piece of paper. You can use a knife, you can use scissors, right? Scissors are probably a better tool. So there's not only what should you automate, but also how, which tool should you leverage. Lots of conversation in the industry around leveraging AI and leveraging RPA, and those are really great tools. And there's a time and place for leveraging these tools, but they're not the tools that should be leveraged every time. So I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, and Ryan is going to talk a little bit more about not only the types of automations, but some examples of where you should be leveraging specific tools that are in the news, so to speak, at this point. So Ryan, please take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Lisa, and thanks everyone for joining. So like Lisa said, there's a lot of different types of automation. Maybe it's not something you think about too often, but if you step back a little bit and think about the different types of automation, some of these types of automation you might experience today. Some of this automation might be more forward thinking. Maybe some of it's newer. But I kind of want to step back a level and just go over the different types of automation and kind of go into each one, kind of how they all play together, and really kind of go through this level by level of how automation works. So the types of automation that we're going to focus on today, number one, data interface automation. I would say this is really common. This is nothing new. This is what a lot of people experience today. This is, and we'll get into more detail in a little bit, but this is passing data back and forth and receiving enriched data to help you make smarter decisions. Some other types of automation we're going to dig into would be analytics automation. So this would be about analyzing trends, using the data you have, and automating it to make smarter decisions. Another type of automation would be workflow automation. So you have processes, you have tasks, you have technology, but how do I automate all those different tasks and different things together? We'll dive into workflow automation as well. And the final one we're going to talk about is task automation. So what do I mean by task automation? What I'm talking about there is specifically the technology that's available today that allows anyone to configure computer software to integrate the actions of what a human would be doing within digital systems to execute a business process. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. We're going to dive into each one of these and have some good discussion on these topics. So for the first one, when I get into data interface automation, what am I focusing on specifically in the healthcare revenue cycle? I'm speaking specifically about claim status for our insurance follow-up. There's a lot of standardized EDI files that get exchanged in the healthcare industry. This is something that's been around for a while. It's common for a lot of folks. This is nothing new. But how we use this does impact what automation you can put in place. So some things I want to focus on that we see in the industry is claim status automation. You might get this through 276, 277 EDI files. You might have some type of data interface, some data automation through a payer website. I'm going to jump into payer validation, payer discovery using the 270, 271 files. Data interface automation for your 835 EDI, gathering your denial information about the remit. These are all things that I think a lot of people have had for a while that, yes, it's automation, but we don't really think about it as automation. But I do want to call it out as a part of your automation to think about. The last one I want to bring up for data interface automation would be under the category of patient pay follow-up. And that's about data interface automation for propensity to pay. This may be something that people have in place today, maybe not. This is understanding what is the likelihood that someone's going to pay their bills. another piece of automation you can look into. Going on to the next type of automation would be analytics automation. And so I would say this might be something that's a little bit less common in the healthcare rev cycle. And when we're talking about both data interface automation and analytics automation, it's all about getting better data to help you make better decisions. So, like really, what is the benefit? Why do automation for data interface automation, analytics automation? It is, I'm taking the data that I have, I'm getting additional information to make better decisions. And one way that you might use this in analytics would be for insurance follow-up. Knowing information about the payer, knowing information about who is the payer, how quickly do they typically pay clean claims, analyzing trends is really what you're trying to get here. What you're trying to get through analytics automation is I'm analyzing trends in the data to help me make better decisions. So when it gets into denials management, if you know by payer that a certain payer tends to deny certain type of claims more, that would maybe help you make better decisions on how you submit the claims. Which denials do you focus on first based on the payer? So there might be information that you currently have that you're not taking advantage of, that if you did, it would help you find those trends, find those details that would really help you make better decisions through automation. And we'll jump into kind of how these different areas play together towards the end of the deck here in a little bit. Something I'm going to call out for patient pay automation would be maybe best outreach methods. If you have information on age of the patient or the guarantor, maybe you have a data interface to gather additional information about the patient or guarantor, and you can supplement what data you have with new data, which helps you determine the best way to outreach to a patient or guarantor. And when I say outreach, I'm talking about maybe a text, maybe send them a text, maybe send them email, maybe contact them digitally instead of just doing a paper statement, or a combination of paper statement, email, text. All these decisions can be made using analytics and automating that to automatically decide how am I going to outreach to the patient or the guarantor. So those are just two brief examples of what you can do with analytics automation. Analytics automation is all about answering questions and having data to back it up to help you make smarter decisions. All right, and the next type of automation that we're going to focus on is workflow automation. So when I talk about workflow automation, I'm talking about the right touch, the right action at the right time. And I'm really referring, when I talk about workflow automation, I'm talking about a healthcare IT system where you have the data available to you and you can decide what to do with that data at the right time. So let's say I have information on the hospital visit, the encounter, who is liable for the charges, who is the insurance that is the primary payer. With workflow automation, you can decide, am I going to automatically do something with that data? Am I going to move it to a work queue? I think in the rev cycle, a lot of times after the claim is submitted is where a lot of the workflow automation comes into play. You're basically going to make a decision on if it's a denial, if something needs to happen based on an event, I can automate that in my workflow. And the types of workflow automation that we typically see is workflow automation based on data. So let's say I'm waiting for a claim submit date to be populated. And once I see a claim submit date, I'm going to move this on to the next stage or change the status of this patient account. Let's say when I receive a 835 EDI file and it has denial information in it. Based on that event, I'm going to route this to the appropriate work queue for something to happen. This is another type of automation that many of you are already familiar with, have experience with, but it is something we want to call out as a type of automation that you can manage or look to enhance on in the healthcare rev cycle. And really, one of the end results of workflow automation is that things are moved to a work queue. We would love to have everything just work perfectly, where there never is any touches required on something, but that's just not how it works today. You need to route something to a work queue because maybe it becomes more complex. Maybe I have to go check a bunch of different systems where I can't use automation. And at least I can grab the accounts, grab the claims that I know are stuck and put them in a work queue. So that's what I'm kind of talking about with workflow automation. All right, and the last and final piece of automation I'm going to talk about today is task automation. And I'm kind of going in order of the healthcare rev cycle of the types of automation you typically experience. Kind of started on data interface automation, moved to analytics automation, to workflow automation, and now I'm at task automation, where all those things have kind of occurred. And now I'm talking about the actions of a human that are typically done by a human. How can I automate those tasks? And what we see in the healthcare rev cycle is this is where you are putting most of your time and your energies into these human tasks that I need people to do something. It got hung up in the process somewhere. There's a manual step I need to take that typically requires human interaction. But I think what is becoming much more popular today is automating those type of human tasks. And going back to kind of the beginning of the presentation, this is why healthcare providers are putting so much money into healthcare software, is because it's becoming harder and harder to find a workforce that can do these tasks. It's harder to hire. And then there's ways that we can automate a lot of the things that are typically done by humans. So when you get to task automation, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this right after our poll question, but when you get into task automation, you're going to ask yourself these questions. In healthcare revenue cycle, what tasks am I performing that can be automated? And this kind of goes across the board, kind of starting from, is there additional data I can get early on in the process that helps me make smarter decisions? Is there trends that I can look at in my data to help me make smarter decisions? Is there a workflow that I can make smarter? Or is there actually a human task that I can automate that's typically done through a human? It's always a question you need to ask yourself. What tasks am I performing that I can automate? So we're going to take a little break here and just do a poll question. So the poll question is, what type of automation do you use most in your workplace today? So this is an interactive poll. You can go ahead and I'm going to give it maybe a minute or so for everyone to interact with this poll question. You can think about it. These are the types of automation we just kind of went over. So I'll give everyone a little bit of time. Select which type of automation I kind of went over do you use most in your workplace today? And I'm interested to see kind of the feedback on this. And I will show the results here shortly as soon as we get people to answer this poll question. All right, I still see some answers coming in. All right, I still see some answers coming in, so I'm not gonna rush people. I think everyone's interested to see the results, so I'll make sure we get a good sample size. All right, looks like everyone's submitted their answers. All right. Okay, it's kind of what I expected. Data interface automation, pretty common today. Most of you have some type of data interface automation. Workflow automation is number 2. Analytics automation, number 3. Task automation, number 4. And that's kind of what I would expect. So task automation is kind of what we're going to focus on a little bit more than the other types of automation. And I would say task automation is something that has really kind of picked up steam in the past 5 to 10 years or so, of something that can really save some time on these manual, typically human processes that every healthcare provider runs into. So when we talk about task automation, this is not the only method, but the most common method for task automation is robotic process automation. Might have seen the abbreviation RPA. So what is robotic process automation? It is the use of software robots to automate processes. I don't know if people have seen that Geico commercial where there's always a CAPTCHA and it's checking to see if you're a robot. Well, that's what we're talking about. These are the robots. Robotic process automation. And basically, we are replicating the actions of a human through the user interface of one or more systems. So anything that a human would do while they are working at their desktop or their laptop, we can mimic those results using software to do that. And traditional software interacts at the data level. So when I'm talking about data interface automation, talking about workflow automation, analytics, those are typically done through the data level. We're passing data back and forth. Well, RPA interacts at the operating system level through an application, through Windows or whatever operating system you're using. You are mimicking the actions of a human. And it's emulated over time from simple screen scraping and keystroke emulation to much more sophisticated methods where you can directly interact with objects in an operating system on a screen. And you can also leverage a lot of really neat tools and artificial intelligence to really make the robots much smarter, these software bots. So there's some really amazing things that you can do that's the technology's really developed in the past 5 years or so that make it a really interesting piece of automation. All right, so that brings us to our next poll question. The question is, do you currently use RPA in your rev cycle tasks? This is another interesting question that I'm interested to hear the results of. Hopefully everyone else is. So do you use RPA or some type of, or I guess I shouldn't say some type of, do you use RPA for your rev cycle tasks today? And I'm going to let everyone answer this question, yes or no. I see answers trickling in. Let's keep it going. All right, we have more people responding to this than the previous poll, so that's good. Maybe some of you are phoning a friend asking, hey, do we use RPA? So maybe I'll give some time for those that need to phone a friend. All right, I think the answers are slowing down. All right, do you currently use RPA for your rev cycle tasks? Let me look at the results on this. 33% yes, 66% no. Okay. That is about what I would expect as well. You know, I think there's a lot, I've heard a lot of limited use of RPA. Yeah, I think there's that's interesting to see the results of, you know, how many people are using RPA today. So we're going to continue to talk about RPA a little bit, and we're going to focus on task automation using RPA. When we talk to healthcare providers, if they're going to be focusing on automation, a lot of the other types of automation we do hear about, I think task automation through RPA is probably focused on more than others. So a lot of the questions that first come up is, what am I going to focus on to automate through RPA first? It really comes down to your return on investment. What tasks am I doing today that require the most manual effort is a good question to ask. Other questions to ask for your what is a good fit for RPA would be, is it high volume and is it repetitive? I think bots are an RPA software can be smart, but you can never completely, at least not yet, you cannot completely replicate what a human can do using bots. But what makes a good fit for RPA, is it high volume and is it repetitive? Is it standardized and rule-based? Is it, you know, based on this business rule, this is what you do? There are rules that apply. If there are no rules and this task can go 1,000 different directions based on the day, it might not be a good candidate for RPA. Along those same lines, is it low variability? So some examples might be data entry, data migration, document migration, file retrieval, logging into systems, generating forms, submitting forms, stuff that in the healthcare rev cycle occurs a lot. You can be very specific where it's, I always go from this system. I have to take information from this system and enter it in another system. Then I have to log in to another system and enter information in this system. If it's that type of things, that type of process, then it's probably a good candidate for RPA. And it's really, like I said earlier, you're identifying the tasks that require the most manual effort today. Where are you putting most of your people to focus on things, on these type of tasks? And what we run into a lot is you should improve your processes. What is the benefits of all this automation? The benefit is not only that you're doing what you do today the same way, but automated. The benefit of automating is that you sit down with a lot of people and you think about how this process happens, and maybe you make improvements on the process instead of just automating a bad process. Like, I go to this system, then I go to this system, then this system 4 different times. Well, let's think about that process, and let's think about maybe there's a better way to do it. Let's just not automate a bad process. That's something we run into a lot. Another benefit of task automation with RPA is that you reduce human errors. Data entry, if something is standardized, if it's rule-based, if it's repetitive, technology can actually probably do it better. Humans have typos. That doesn't mean that RPA bots never make any mistakes, but this type of stuff, there's less human error, typos, data entry errors. Technology solutions have higher accuracy. And if you do go in with the RPA initiative, you'd be amazed at some of the disruptive solutions that you can identify. And maybe you free up your people to do other things that they haven't had time to do in the past, that you learned, wow, if I had people I could move to another area, I could really do some amazing things. So that's just some benefits of task automation and some of the pros of moving to task automation. All right. So, and really, we've talked about these different types of automation, and what I think a lot of people are focusing on today tends to be task automation. But really, the ideal approach is from beginning to end, you have all this automation that works together. These types of automation really make one type of automation makes the other type of automation much more effective. If you have better data interfaces and a lot of new data interfaces, you're going to have more data for analytics. If you have more data, you can analyze more trends. You can make smarter decisions with more data. You can also, jumping from analytics to the workflow, you can have a better workflow if you have better analytics and better data, and it all kind of builds together to then into finally task automation, where you have tasks, maybe fewer tasks because you've handled them up front earlier. But really the idea here is to show that you have different types of automation and they all work together. And you can go from patient intake all the way through to a bill being paid, and a lot of worst case scenario things could happen along the line. But with automation, analytics, data interface automation, analytics automation, workflow automation, and task automation, you can handle a lot of the pitfalls that we all run into very efficiently. And I just really want to point out, having these different types of automation work together is really the ideal solution. All right, so getting into a little bit more of the specifics of what this looks like, and I really want to focus on all the types of automation coming together. I'm just going to call out a few of where we see all these types of automation coming into play and working together. I think some of the biggest applications of all these types of automation I talked about are listed here, where I talk about denials management, prior authorizations, credit balances and adjustments, just general insurance follow-up, insurance underpayments. I think those are 5 really good examples of where you can put all these types of automation into play together. I'm going to walk through just 2 of them that are highlighted here in bold of kind of what this looks like. So when we talk about denials management, I'm going to kind of go from left to right of how all these types of automation work together. So denials management, for my data interface automation, I receive a automated 835 EDI file that is automatically loaded into my system. That would identify the CARC and the WARC code related to the denial. So I have some specifics on why there was a denial. So that is enhancing the data, the knowledge I have on the claim that I submitted. So then I move to analytics automation. Based on that payer, whoever the payer might be, what is their trends on what they tend to deny, and what is the success rate of the denials that I am submitting? Or based on the payer, what denials should I focus on first? You might have data that shows that I submitted a denial, or that I received a denial, maybe resubmitted the claim or submitted an appeals packet and won the appeal. But based on the payer, do you know which types of denials to focus on first, or which ones you tend to win appeals on? That's meaningful information that you can gather if you would just focus on the trends of the information. And that gets into workflow automation for denials management. If I can generate, based on the first 2 pieces of automation, if I can generate a prioritized work queue based on what I know, based on the payer, here is my highest return on investment denial that I should focus on. And then finally, once I've generated that work queue, if I can have my RPA solution go right off of that work queue that is specialized, that is focused, and I can have the bot run off that work queue and gather the required information for this type of denial, generate the appropriate forms, resubmit the claim, or generate an appeals packet and submit it to the payer. These are all things that you could have your task automation do. And from beginning to end in this denials management process, I didn't have a human touch a single thing. This is all automated. This is kind of showing the power of automation kind of working together. And this is an ideal scenario. It's not easy to always get it to this, but this is something you can do. All right. So the last area I'm going to focus on, kind of giving another example of automation from beginning to end, would be credit balances and adjustments. These are something that everyone has to go through, that you have to deal with. So let me kind of walk through this process. For data interface automation, you're going to monitor, receive, and process payment files based on the patient demographics and the encounter type. And this is, I'm kind of referring to patient pay credit balances. Maybe they paid too much. There was a confusion. We have to submit a refund. Based on the patient demographics and the encounter type, I'm getting into analytics automation here. When should I submit the refunds? Maybe they have a recurring encounter where they're going to be in the hospital again very shortly. And we know they're going to have another payment come up very shortly. And so, you can learn some information based on information you have on that patient. Based on those rules, I'm going to generate in workflow automation. I'm going to trigger credit balance accounts to be refunded at the appropriate time. And I'm going to segregate out the types of refunds to process into different work queues. Maybe depending on which facility they were in, which IT system they used, which EHR system they were in. Maybe there's a different process to submit the refund, and you need to do it a different way. Well, with workflow automation, you can segregate all those tasks out to different work queues, and they can be worked separately. And you kind of organize the work to be consistent. And then finally, for task automation, instead of having a human go through these systems, the process of creating a refund, making an adjustment, let's just use a bot. Let's use a bot that can do this repetitive work. We can trigger it off the work queue to log into multiple systems, generate a refund check, post the appropriate adjustments. These are things that you could have a bot in place to do. The bot works really well with these other types of automation to do the task. All right. Well, and that is the last slide we're going to focus on today. So in summary, I kind of just wanted to thank you for to listening about the different types of automation, all these details, and I think we're going to open it up for some questions, unless Lisa, you had anything else you wanted to share? No? Okay. All right. So.
All right.
Some questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. Thanks so much for a very interesting presentation. For people who are attending, please feel free to enter any questions you have in that Q&A box. And if we aren't able to answer all the questions, we're happy to follow up offline. I can start us off, Ryan, with a couple of quick questions. The first one is, what type of automation? And I wanted to say also that I mispronounced the name of the company at the beginning, which is not great for an editor. So it's actually Finvi. I got corrected on that. So I just want to clear that up. Anyway, first question, what type of automation do you view as having the greatest impact?
It's a good question. I would say there's some foundational pieces of integration that is very common today. Data interface automation has been around for a long time, and I think it's something we take for granted. And you can always look at improving the data that you receive into your system to enhance what you know. I think there's some arguments to be made that is a really big impact. I think for what is the latest trends in automation, task automation has the opportunity to really free up a lot of workforce. So I would probably lean towards that as one of the things that can be focused on just in the past 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, and if I could add, I absolutely agree, Ryan. I think part of it is also, what area to focus on. I think the denials example you gave is a very prime example. It's such a complex process, right? And we kind of all know, we have to be watching for timely filing. There's so many different things to be considered, the data that we need to gather, documents from clinical perspective, all of the things that need to go into an appeal process. So, from a focus area, Ryan talked about the type. I think the second layer of it is from a focus area. I would say denials is probably a pretty high area to focus on.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Second question we have is, Ryan, you mentioned a propensity to pay. What kind of data do you consider the most valuable for account segmentation?
Yeah, so for propensity to pay, we're talking really about patient pay or the guarantor being responsible to pay. And I think what's valuable is to know what is their, really what you're determining is their likelihood to pay. How much effort am I going to put into having this person pay? And I think what is really common in this area is to have things based on credit scores, credit score based reporting. I think one thing that we've seen is that a lot of people don't have credit scores. They don't have credit-based reporting. So I think there's a lot of additional information out there that you can use to determine their propensity to pay. Data that is available, their online profile, information about your online profile, additional data that is available like DMV records, a lot of other things that I've seen used for propensity to pay models. So those are just a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think the leveraging alternative data sources, right, to Ryan's point, paints a more holistic picture of the patient or the grantor in certain scenarios that give you better insight, not only in their propensity to pay, but also, things that flow from that knowledge as well. What's the best time to contact them? What's the best mode of communication? So I think a lot of it is really trying to stay away from a very one data point, in this case, the credit score focused approach to propensity to pay.
Right, because not everybody has a credit score, right? So, yeah. We have almost 100 people attending this webinar, but I don't see any more questions. Is there anybody out there who would like to input a couple of questions so we can take this up to the top of the hour? Going once. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to add, Ryan, Lisa, to the presentation, or extra thoughts you'd like to expand on?
Yeah, I can add some closing thoughts. And again, thank you everybody for joining us today. Sure. We really appreciate it. I think, to Ryan's point, the key here of the message that we want to make sure that you're resonating with is none of these automations should happen in a vacuum, right? And there are opportunities to not only leverage what is super interesting and in the news today, which is RPA. We think it's a very valuable tool and you should use it, but it cannot exist in isolation. It has to exist within an ecosystem of not only automating data, but also having, work queues that actually are actionable, right? That you're not just trying to sift through, that give your team, when they do have to touch something, the right next step and right direction of what to do, so that they're not cherry picking what they're going to work on. And so automation takes away some of the easy things off their plate that the bots can do. And then the other side of it is, okay, the things that we do give to somebody to touch, how do we make sure that we present it to them in the priority that is best for the organization and for the goals and the metrics that you're using from that analytics automation to get the right results. So very important that everything is working in concert and not just a myopic view of, okay, we need to leverage RPA somehow, right? Well, your RPA strategy needs to be a part of your broader strategy for sure.
Yeah, and just along those same lines, a lot of RPA bots, sometimes they can be human-assisted bots. So you want to have the option to say, I have a work queue that can be fully automated at times, where a bot can take it. Maybe if I don't want to use a bot right now, I can have a human go off that same work queue, or maybe I can have an assisted bot where it's a mix of both. And that's hard to do if you don't have an ecosystem that kind of is set up to do that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there are any health systems out there, health and hospital systems, that are particularly advanced in using this type of technology. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think, there's certainly lots of health systems that are using RPA for different areas. One area that we've seen with some of our clients working very well is around kind of that process of the payer follow-up when you went to Ryan's point on the assisted approach, right? That you have, a queuing system of calling the payer. And that process is automated through RPA alongside with other technologies in AI. And then the end user is really just picking up the phone once that payer actually answers. And we've seen a number of our hospital and health system clients leveraging that process very effectively to cut down not only the hold times, but ultimately touch more accounts at a higher frequency. That's a really good example that we see often. I don't know, Ryan, if you have anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of kind of one-off scenarios of where you might have a individual rev cycle team kind of set up their own thing. And sometimes it works well with EHR systems, sometimes not so much. So it's kind of hit or miss depending on who you talk to. I think there's definitely room for improvement across the board.
Well, I think there's always room for improvement all the time, right? I think we've kind of run out of questions. I don't think there's any extra ones there. So perhaps we should wrap it up here. Want to thank Lisa and Ryan for an excellent discussion. I hope it was enjoyable to everyone attending. Thanks to Finvi for sponsoring today's webinar. And thank you all again, the 100 of you joining us today. And we hope to see you at future Becker's webinars. Thank you so much and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.